G'day Darkrealmers, it's horror author and illustrator Michael J. Elliott here with you again today. And it's still winter here in Australia, and your humble author didn't get away unscathed. I've been battling a nasty cold for a few weeks, plus I've had some other things on the go. So I apologise for not being here for all my Darkrealmers, but I'm back now and I've got a great indie anthology flick for you today. Hey, if this is your first trip to the diaries, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us. And if you want some help in choosing the best horror movies and books from mainstream and indie, then you've come to the right place. Just hit the subscribe button and the bell notification and you'll always be up to date. Okay, Darkrealmers, today's flick that we're going to be looking at is called The Horror Network Volume 1. And is it any good? Well, I'll let you know because we're going to get started right now. Yeah! Well, Darkrealmers, The Horror Network Volume 1 is a little bit different to some indie horror films because the producers, Brian Doughton and Douglas Connor, didn't actually sit down with some scriptwriters and write, get them to write the stories in here. What they actually did was they sat down and watched over 200 indie short horror films, and from that they selected the 5 best. And by and large, they did a really, really good job. Okay, now the first one is very cleverly set up that we don't see it in its entirety, Darkrealmers. It's about a woman and she's driving to her farm in rural England, and there's a great sense of foreboding. She's on the phone talking to her friend and talking about these anonymous phone calls she's been getting. And as she's driving, we're seeing the bare trees, because it must be fall or coming close to winter, the lonely roads, the desolation. So we get that sense of isolation. And during the night, she wakes up to noises, and she gets quite scared, and we're sort of there with her too in her isolation. And she rings up her friends and says, "Thank you so much for the toys you sent for the kids, and especially the Jack in the Box that she'd been playing with earlier." And the friend says, "I didn't give you a Jack in the Box." Well, we know something's going to happen, but then we get a cut, okay, and we come to the first story called Edward. Now, this is essentially a 2-man story which could quite easily be on stage, and we're talking about a young guy called Edward who's talking to his psychiatrist who's Russian, and there's a sense of he doesn't care, he's not really into the therapy, it's all a bit of a bore. But as things go on, and you need to keep watching this one, Darkrealmers, because it is a slow burn, the conversation gets darker and darker and darker, and the psychiatrist becomes more and more nervous at Edward and his interpretations of life and things he'd like to do. His talk about religion is very unnerving, and it culminates with Edward having some sort of seizure on the couch. And I won't tell you what goes on from there, but the ending is just superb. And if you're looking for something that's not horrifying in terms of gore and blood and so forth, but in terms of pure psychological drama, you'll love this one. Now, the second one was my utter favourite. This was just brilliant. It's called Quiet, and it's a quite appropriate title, Darkrealmers, because it's about a young, partially deaf girl who's being teased on the bus on the way home, and she gets off the bus to walk home, and she's left her mobile phone on the bus. Well, as she's walking home, a man in a van starts to approach her. Well, she runs away, and she runs into the forest and gets her hair caught in some twigs and branches and so forth, and her hearing aid gets pulled out. Well, this is superb because there is no dialogue, there's no sound. We are basically this character who, you know, is at a disadvantage. There is a man after her, and we are terrified for this young girl, okay? And she hides out in an abandoned shed or, you know, an old stone building, and the guy gets closer and closer. And the twist at the end is just magnificent, Darkrealmers. It is so good that the whole plot line is explained, but there's more to it than you think, okay? From a standard, this is a nasty type guy after this poor girl, to something a lot more. So that is a really, really great one. Okay, the next one was a foreign one, and I think, I may be wrong, but I think it was Spanish. And out of all of them, this one was the one that disappointed me the most. It was about a girl or a woman who'd been, you know, psychologically, she has problems because she watched her mother being tortured by her father. And it reminded me of those 70, you know, foreign films where there's just blood and horror and gore and violence for the sake of it being there, okay? Because we get this horrifying scene of this girl's mother being tortured, and the plot wasn't terribly riveting. I found it distracting because I just found the whole gore for the sake of gore and the unnecessary violence, which was shown rather than implied, was just let the movie down, or the short down. But then the fourth one is very clever indeed. It's called The Deviant, and it's totally silent, filmed in black and white. And we have this film about this man who takes his lover, or we assume it's his lover, it could be a stranger who's just doing some work for him, into bed where they have sex, and then he kills him. And it progresses, and then we see this murderer at the end and what he does, and it's just, wow, okay, that's creepy. That is really creepy, okay, because I can't give you away, but it's short and it hits you with a punch. Then we go back to the woman in the farmhouse, where the tension ratchets up and we finally get the explosive, you know, scare that's happening. Look, this is a great little indie horror film. As I said, the producers have done a great job picking some movies that will have you on the edge of your seat without subjecting you to gore and splatter, apart from movie 3, of course. And it's more psychological terror. It's more that, okay, what's going on? You know, what's going to happen next? Especially number 2. I was just on the edge of my seat with that one, Darkrealmers. Now, this movie is available on Amazon Prime, but you can also find it on DVD. So if you're not a Prime member, do check it out at your local DVD store, or see if you can find it from a download site, because it's well worth the effort. And it's great, as I always say, to support indie artists. And I'm going to be scouring the web looking to see if they did actually make a volume 2, and if I can track it down, if it does exist, that is, Darkrealmers, you can be sure I'll be reviewing it. Okay, Darkrealmers, that's my review of The Horror Network Volume 1. I hope you've liked it. Now, if you've seen this movie, let me know down in the comments and tell me, what was your favourite out of the 5 shorts? Which one really terrified you? As I've said, for me, the best one was number 2, Quiet. Okay, so that's it from me, horror author Michael J. Elliott. Thank you so much for joining us. And as I always say, Darkrealmers, if you're going to watch indie horror films, make sure you do it with the lights on, okay?